Hi, this is Brandon Smitley from Thirst Gym here in Terre Haute, Indiana. Today we're talking about the differences between conjugate and concurrent training. If you're looking for more information on this, I've written some stuff on Elite FTS. I've also have this on a podcast episode, Thirst for More podcast. So you can listen and find out more information there if you're a reader or you want to listen to this while you're driving. Otherwise, watch this YouTube video and I think you'll get some good information. So conjugate training is usually thought of in the realms of powerlifting, right? We think about the conjugate system that Louis Simmons and Westside Barbell has made very popular and is a very common type of training. The other person is Nate Harvey. He has done a lot in terms of the sports performance realm with conjugate training with his athletes when he was at Buffalo. So we've also got concurrent training. And so we're going to talk about the differences between these and why they can maybe be overlapped, but there are differences in conjugate and concurrent training. I think many people get them confused in terms of what they're actually doing. I think more people actually probably use conjugate than they even actually realize. And I'll talk about why I think concurrent training is probably more beneficial in the long run than conjugate, but conjugate can be part of a concurrent program approach. So if we're looking at conjugate training specifically, we're mainly talking about the rotation of lifts, how exercises are rotated, programmed, and sequenced together, which is why it's called the conjugate sequencing system, how they are sequenced to get results. So in a simple way to think of this as progressions and regressions, right? You're not going to start a beginner lifter with a safety bar back squat against chains to a box. You're probably just not going to start someone off with that variation. They probably need to start off with a very simple variation to learn how to squat with both legs bilaterally. So you might start with a goblet box squat or a heels elevated goblet squat, something that's going to set the client or athlete up for success, and then you build them up over the long run, and how you sequence those exercises that you teach them is what's going to get the results in terms of getting stronger, more explosive, powerful, whatever your goals are. Concurrent training, on the other hand, is how we train simultaneously and how we concurrently work through different training modalities. So conjugate training, in terms of the Westside Barbell, people think of their max effort and their dynamic effort training, and then your repetition effort is basically your accessory work, how you're performing things for reps to build up weak areas. And Louis Simmons and Westside Barbell call these special exercises. You can call them whatever you want, but basically that's where the conjugate stuff comes from. And concurrently, they are training really heavy, they're training for speed and power, and then they're training for hypertrophy and different rep ranges to build up those things. They're using their concurrent system within a week, where in sports performance, we prefer to use a concurrent training model. In most cases, they're not in our gym, in a single training session. So we're going to talk about how these can kind of interlap with each other. So from a conjugate standpoint, I'm just going to make a simple list of a common way to rotate lifts in the squat. So if we know from a powerlifting perspective that our main exercise is the back squat, everything that we need to do from a conjugate standpoint needs to enhance that back squat. Now, what might enhance your back squat is going to be different than what enhances my back squat. Everybody's built differently. We have different strengths, different weaknesses, just different experiences. There's going to be different ways that you can improve that back squat. And that's the nice thing about the conjugate system, is that you can use different ways to get this done. Not everybody has to do the same thing. But in general, if we're looking over the course of a long meet prep, or we're trying to get ready for our first meet, we're going to go from general to specific, okay? So the way that these are conjugated is to be able to provide a positive training adaptation. So we're going to say that somebody's getting ready for their first meet, they know how to train, they can already squat well, they know how to back squat, okay, let's get that out of the way, they know how to back squat properly, technique-wise, everything looks good. We're just trying to get this better from a conjugate standpoint. So something that you might do is you might have, let's say, a safety squat bar, box squat, versus chains, okay? After we've done that, let's assume these are all 2 to 3 week cycles just to make it simple, okay? After we do that, obviously we got a box, a different bar, and chains. None of those are competition specific. None of those are in the competition. It's a squat variation that's nowhere near the competitive movement. Then we're going to try to figure out a way to make it a little bit more like the competition movement. So my suggestion let's just keep the safety squat bar since we've already had that, and let's just make it a safety squat bar squat versus chains. Okay, so we're going to get rid of the box for another 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, so now we've got the box away, we're free squatting with the chains. The next step might just be to do a safety bar box squat, or safety bar squat, I'm sorry. So now we've got straight weight, we've got the specialty bar, and we've got no box. So we're not specific, but you know, we're actually squatting without a lot of other things. The next thing we might do, we might move to a barbell. So then we might say, hey, we're going to use a front squat for the next cycle. So, you know, the load technically is going to go down a little bit because the front squat's harder than the safety squat, but we're using a straight bar now, and we're getting a better feel of how that load might potentially feel. Then if you really wanted to get really, really crazy, then you could do something like a high bar squat for a couple weeks. And then you go to your competition squat for a couple weeks. That would be a way to progress from a conjugate standpoint of how one thing is going to benefit the next, the next, the next, the next, to where this, at the end of the day, is going to be what matters most. Now, if we're looking at a concurrent system, I'm going to show you what I mean here from this, from a powerlifting perspective. I think if you probably know about the conjugate system, then you probably know a little about the concurrent, the way that they work. But basically, they've got their max effort lower, their max effort upper, their DE lower, and their DE upper. So you got 4 main sessions throughout the week. These are your heavy ones. And these are your, well, I will say light. They're not exactly light, but they're definitely lighter than, the weight is not the important thing on the dynamic effort day, and we're going to put the speed component behind it. So that's what you're basically trying to train on those specific days. Your repetition effort then comes in as your accessory work. Now from a sports performance standpoint, and I'll add that in a powerlifting perspective, those usually run between a 2 to 4 week cycles in most cases. You could definitely make a case for a 3 or a 2 or a 4, sometimes a 5, maybe a 1 week cycle for your max effort stuff. Really depends, but that's up to you. Now the concurrent for the sports performance realm, usually we use letters and numbers to decipher what we're going to do. So usually our A blocks are usually our speed and power. Okay, we do speed and power and this block. When we go to our B block, then we go to strength. So we're going to make sure we're on strength. Then when we go to our C block, then we go to usually something that's going to be unilateral and hypertrophy related. And then our D block and our E block, if even applicable, so we'll just put if applicable, because we're depending upon the time of the season and the athlete, we may not even get to an E block. And then the D block is going to be almost prehab, rehab, and even, our trunk stuff. And I'm just going to put mini on here, our minutia of little things that particular athlete needs to help with these things. So as you can see, every single training session, even this can be anywhere for our athletes, anywhere from 2, we even have 1, but mainly 2 to 4 days per week. This is what our training system looks like. So we're picking a couple things, usually 1 to 2 things that go in this. We're picking 1 thing that goes here. We're picking 1 to 2 things that go here. We're usually picking 2 to 3 things that go here. And if we even get to the E block, same thing, 2 to 3 things go here. And this is usually just extra, or your conditioning. If you need to add that for that particular athlete, we save that towards the end. So as you can see, we just go down the force velocity curve, hitting everything that's explosive first. We move to our heavy stuff second, and everything else falls underneath in between. So why would this be beneficial for your athletes? Well, the nice thing is we have to think about residuals, and I've talked about this in a previous YouTube video, which you can find underneath the force velocity curve video that I have on my YouTube channel. It's also on our website at thirstgym.com, where we talk about the force velocity curve and where certain things fall. That is something I would definitely recommend. I'm not going to go into too depth in this video, but pretty much all your speed component things are going to last anywhere from like 4 to 7 days, 5 to 7 days. So you need to train something explosively consistently, which is what the Conjugate System has done well, is that when you do your dynamic effort work, you're getting that in every week. Your strength-related exercises, they don't have to be pushed as frequently, but trying to improve them, you definitely want to. But your residual, when they will fall off, is usually, you're seeing down to 90% usually within a month. And then your hypertrophy and other things like that, you can see the literature say a couple different things, but usually looking around 3 weeks or so. So the nice thing about is concurrently training everything, not only in the same session, but week after week, month after month, year after year, is that you're constantly getting this stepping stone every single week over the course of the long run, that you never see anything really tank and go down. That's the bad thing about certain things that utilize certain training blocks, is that you might see one performance quality dip in order to improve another quality. And while that can happen, and sometimes can be beneficial, you have to think about your population of who you're working with. The other thing that I'll add to that in terms of the concurrent stuff is that you can push more what you need to push and pull back more what you need to pull back on. So, if you are an in-season athlete, you're probably going to push your strength and your power pretty hard. You're probably going to pull back on your accessory work and all your little things, because you don't have a whole lot of training resources in your cup, and you don't want to overfill that cup or that bucket. So if you're trying to put all that extra volume on there, the athlete may not be able to recover, and then you're hindering their performance, when at the end of the day, what we want to do is improve performance. So that is a very, very brief look at the difference between conjugate versus concurrent training. Like I said, I have further resources available through Elite FTS and through the Thirst for More podcast, where I talk about this, as well as the force velocity curve, which is also on thirstgym.com. So you can find all those resources there. They'll be in the description box below to be able to get you to our website and to find those pieces of information. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments section. This is definitely a very commonly butchered idea. I think more people are conjugating their lifts, the way they sequence their stuff, even though you guys that do not like Westside and do not like conjugate training, understand that conjugate training is not bands, chains, boxes, and specialty bars. Conjugate training is the way exercises are sequenced to be able to yield a performance benefit, and in most cases than not, if you're not doing that as a competitive strength athlete, you're probably missing out on some potential gains there. And if you are a conjugate based person, then you probably already know how this works. You just need to think about how you're sequencing your max effort lifts a little bit better. And if you're in the athletic performance realm, this isn't as important so much in terms of improving the squat, bench, and deadlift, but it's important in terms of creating the total athlete and how you teach them and integrate them into the weight room, and get their performance benefits to come from improved strength and movement qualities. And the way you conjugate stuff can help them see those performance improvements. And then you want to make sure that you're concurrently training all qualities of fitness year-round, if at all possible, to give your athletes and your strength athletes, powerlifters, strongmen, whatever, the best chances to succeed on the platform or in the court, field, swimming pool, etc. So if you got any questions, leave them in the comments section, and we'll see you next time.